Hi, I'm the Sad Panda. This is going to be another episode of my series, I Read This, Should You? But before I get into what this story is, what it's about, I want to say, first things first, that today I'm probably going to be streaming. I'm probably going to stream on my YouTube. I don't know what I'm going to stream yet, but we'll figure it out when I get there. But I want to talk about this story, and I'm sorry that yesterday I didn't post this video. It's mostly because I was busy. I was doing other things, house sitting for my mother and stuff like that. But honestly, I was just kind of busy, so I didn't get it, but I'm doing it today. This story is called RakhtaBhushan, or Blood Ornament, and I can't do my normal 100 chapter reviews, because usually what I do is I'll discuss the first few chapters, and then I'll kind of summarize what happens later on in the story, and then give you an overall review of a number of some sort. This story, unfortunately, isn't long enough for me to give that review. I did this story because one of my viewers asked me to do so, and I can honestly say that it is one of the most confusing stories I've ever read. Not because it's difficult, just because every chapter has a new character to be the lead. And it's also not really succinct because it jumps around all the time. So the first chapter is a discussion between two greater gods, discussing Asura and another god. I forget who he was, and they get into a fight. And then the next chapter doesn't have anything to do with that. And it's a princess getting courted by a bunch of dudes that are fighting for her hand in marriage. And then the chapter after that, it just changes every single chapter. And I've read a story similar to this, but instead of it changing every chapter and being a different section of the story itself, it was every few chapters they would switch main characters, but it would take place in the same area of the story. So it's just really hard to follow along with it, because I'll be reading it and then I'll be who is this person? Who are these people? And it also doesn't help that a lot of the names are confusing, right? Because it's a Hindu story or an Indian story, and it has a lot of Hindu gods and stuff, and it has a lot of names that I don't really understand. And that's not, of course, the fault of the author, because this story is written from a different culture, right? And it's translated over into English, and then I read it. But it only has 24 chapters, so if I were to do my normal review, it would literally just be me telling you exactly what happens through the entire story. When I did my One Piece, I did a bunch of arcs, because there's even if I gave you 10 arcs, there's still 20 arcs that you don't know and you could still read and but this is if I told you what happened in the first few chapters, right, it would just be me telling you what happens in the whole story, because it's only 24 chapters. And I mean, obviously that's not an issue. It's just that when I review stuff, it would be a lot easier to review if it was longer, right? Or if it was a book that was succinct, because this just gives me a lot of confused vibes, right? Where I'll be reading it and I'll be thinking about it, and then I'll be all right, well, this makes sense, one of these, one of the chapters was a god gets punished because he made fun of a sage, or was teasing a sage by making him unable to speak, which what he does is he preaches and speaks or whatever, and a greater god comes down, he's hey, you can't do that, and he sends him down to earth to as a punishment for 15 days or 20 days or something like that, to help a flood that has not yet happened but is going to happen, because they're gods, they can obviously make that happen or whatever. And I can sit there, I can read that, I can be okay, understand, but then we'll jump to a completely different area, completely different people, and the story is, I guess it's the same, right? It's the same story because it takes place in the same general location, but the people are different, and that means the story is in turn different. And I mean, obviously later in chapters we get part 2s and part 3s of other of the characters' stories, but that's not until you met 10, 12 people. And it becomes one of those stories where I would like to give it a more proper read and a more proper chance, but I just can't follow it. If it was more you give me a couple of the chapters that are one person's point of view in a row, and then you give me another person's point of view in a row, it would be a lot easier to follow. And it's not that I don't like the story, it's just not very easy to follow, and it's honestly kind of forgettable, right? I have issues with like characters that I just can't remember. And I remember in the first few chapters what's kind of going on, but after that, it's kind of just a blur of words and time that I spent reading that has become useless to me. Because I don't remember it. And it's not an issue, right? That, I mean, if this is your kind of story and you like to read it, that's understandable. But if you don't like to read it, I wouldn't fault you for it, because it is just, like, I can't use context clues, because like one chapter is one person, and then I can't go from like a different chapter to get a context clue of who this person is, or what they're about, or what their motivations are. You don't get any of that because you only get a tiny snippet of the chapters, and these chapters are unfortunately not very long. I could understand it more if the chapters were longer, but the chapters aren't. They're just small. And I know this isn't really what my subscriber wanted to hear from me when I told them that I was going to review the story, but I'm not going to lie to my audience. If that is not what you like, unfortunately, that is how I feel about it. And this story, I'd probably give it like, for character design and stuff, because I remember some of the designs being really cool, I'll give it like a 7, because like I remember some of the abilities are really cool. Like there's this guy that can like summon like tons of weapons, kind of like the Gates of Babylon in, I forget what the show is called, but Gilgamesh, he has the ability to open up gates to his like treasury and launch weapons out of it, and that kind of thing. And I thought that was really cool. It's a really cool design. So for design, I think it's like a 7. It has really interesting characters that look cool, at least from my mind's eye. But for story-wise, I give it like a 3.5, 4. It's hard to follow, and I know this review is very short, but it's because I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I don't remember it all too well, and my subscribers know that when I do these kind of videos, I do them from memory. So that gives you an idea of how I feel about stories. When I do a story from memory and I can remember a lot of it, like One Piece or like Chrysalis or like Cultivation Big Shot, these stories that I remember very well, I can give you a very in-depth review on. Like I can explain some of the characters, I can explain some of the games they play, I can explain some of like the niche stuff that people that haven't read the story would like to know. But if I don't remember them, then the story isn't as good for me. And that's unfortunate, because I love reading, and it's hard to sit down and read something that I don't comprehend, right? And maybe that's just me, and maybe if you read it, you would understand it better, but I do not. So I don't think the story is bad. It just doesn't have enough time to build on the ideas that it presents. And obviously, if you like my content, leave a like and leave a comment. I always respond to them, and I'm sorry that this isn't the review that you wanted. I almost guarantee it. But, you know, if you don't like the content, leave a dislike and tell me what I need to do better. Now, I told you in the beginning that I don't know when I'm going to be streaming, but I'm going to be streaming today on my YouTube. So if you have questions on things that you want to know about me, or about how I feel about stories, or what I normally like to read, or anime, or anything, I'm here to discuss, and we can do that. It'll be on my YouTube, so just look forward to that in a few hours or so. So have a great rest of your day, and yeah, that's about it.